Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Patriot's Tale by Nicole Pierman. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, September 30th, 1778, South Carolina. 24 families in 2 days. Lily Thompson had never seen so many families on her road before. She didn't know why until she smelled it. Smoke from the burning town curled its way through the sky, blanketing it in its thick, dark stench of charred flesh as it dipped through her cracked window, gagging her awake. Lily vomited over her windowsill until her stomach was sore and unable to move without a wave of sickness overcoming her. It took hours before the smell of burnt flesh disappeared from the air. After recovering her sense of smell and a taste other than vomit, she heard movement on the road. This time it was not British soldiers. Lizzie perked up, though it made her head rush with dizziness. She wasn't alone. In the past 6 months, she counted 3 towns burned in Chiraz district, but unlike the other 2 towns, there were survivors, fleeing from fire, from ash, from disaster. Lily knew her idea was implausible, and she knew what people must have thought of her when they saw her standing by the side of the road, with weapons strapped to her belt and her bags already packed as her mare, Avalon, gnawed on a patch of grass beside her. But this was the chance she had been waiting for. As the survivors migrated in uneven waves, many of them refused to acknowledge her. The handful that stopped to speak to her turned their backs on Lily after realizing that her offering of bread came with a proposition that wasn't worth their time. The survivors have family and friends. They had somewhere safe to go. They didn't need the promises of protection she offered them in return for safe travel. Lily was nothing but a burden and another mouth to feed. She shook off the tears of hopelessness after the 24th survivor had spit on her shoe and cursed her name. Lily made her way back to her cottage with Avalon trailing behind her, head hung in defeat. Lily knew she asked too much, but she had to try. She began her descent down the hill into a small rocky valley, unable to ignore the emptiness in her stomach that demanded her attention over the pity party that was forming in her chest, to check her traps and snares for a late supper. She'd figure out something out, unable to give up on what she had been dreaming of since the age of 15, especially after hearing news of the growing number of men and women supporting the Continental Army. But for now, she needed to eat. Lily checked all her traps and snares as she zigzagged her way through the forest, but they were all empty, the unfortunate side effect of so many travelers. She heard a rustle above her and smiled at a squirrel chewing on a nut, its mouth already packed with food. Lily pulled out her slingshot and a rock from a pouch tied to her hip and took aim only for the animal to run off, startled by the sound of agitated voices. Lily frowned as she heard movement behind her and turned to see a rabbit fleeing towards a stream not too far from where she stood, the opposite direction from the voices ringing with fear. More voices sounded farther up the dirt road, different, happier voices, and she knew them all too well. British soldiers. With an eye roll, Lily hurried through the bushes, following the frantic pleas and whispers near the tree line that met the road. A young man with chocolate-colored hair and his graying father were arguing as she slid behind a tree. A boy with black hair, no older than 5, and a 14-year-old girl were watching them a few feet away, their sunken, anxiety-ridden faces staring at their father as his body began to shake. Another family? Lily thought, her mind racing with possibilities. Their voices picked up, snapping Lily out of her thoughts. She edged closer to get a better view, to be reminded of what she'd seen the past few days. The look of defeat in their eyes, the heaviness of guilt wrapped around their shoulders, and the smell of absolute fear that wafted off every person she met on the road. The 25th family was no different. It didn't surprise her. The smell and smoke was undeniable 2 days ago, and it still hung in the air. Lily felt the same way and looked just like them 2 years ago, 1 year ago, lost, enraged, confused, cold. It felt like being eaten alive. The young man began waving his hands towards something on the road, but Lily could not see what it was from her position behind the tree and could barely hear anything but a few mumbled words before the father roared with such force it made Lily jump in surprise. Do not shush me. James, I'm coming to. Without thinking, Lily launched herself from behind a tree and onto his back before the man reached the road, cutting him off as she pulled him down to the ground. Lily clutched his shoulders, gasping to get air into her lungs. You should really listen to your son's advice, Lily huffed, trying to catch her breath as the man rolled off her. The father sat up and scurried away from her, his eyes wide. Who the hell are you? I could be your friend, but if not, I could be someone who saved you by accident or fate, if you believe in such a thing. I don't believe in fate, he growled. Oh, I agree, but I didn't want to assume. Again, I ask, who are you? Are you spying on us for the redcoats down the road? The father sputtered, his fingers rolling into fists. Lily shushed him, her finger hovering over her lips. No, I'm not. So would you stop hollering? If I were, would I have saved you from making a scene? Which would have endangered me just as much as your family. She motioned to Pecker, full of rope, sticks, and other miscellaneous things that fallen out of her sack from the fall. The father inhaled, rising to his feet. I would not have made a scene, she side-eyed him. That's probably a lie. How do you know? I could hear you two arguing from where I was, which was a decent length away. That doesn't mean, the father began, but Lily cut him off. If you got any louder, the soldiers that moved on would have heard and circled back to investigate, and then all of us would have to face a group of 10 to 15 redcoats because of you. Your son silently pissing himself on the road isn't creating any trouble. You are. How dare you? I apologize for my brashness, but you know panicking doesn't help, Lily muttered. The father's face glazed over, his lips pressed firmly together, but he didn't reply. Knowing there was nothing more to say to him, Lily stepped through the thickest part of the trees and saw a tall blond man swaying in place, his knuckles taut and white as he clenched his fists around his horse's reins. The horse standing beside him was chewing on the grass that grew beside the road, content and undeterred. What happened to him? He looks paralyzed, Lily asked, her brows creasing. We've been traveling all morning, and we're about to rest before we heard soldiers on the road, so we ran into the woods to hide, except James. He's been on the road for, I don't know for how long. The young man with chocolate-colored hair replied. Lily bit her lip and started toward the tree line. The family stayed behind, watching her with wide, sullen eyes. James, the redcoats are gone. The family is waiting for you, she called, but James didn't move. After calling to him again with no success, Lily looked around for something to throw at him. With a promise not to hit him, Lily threw pebbles and sticks at James's feet once, twice, and finally she saw James shake his head when a pebble startled his horse, making it nicker beside his ear. Oh, finally, Lily exclaimed. As James walked towards the group, she could see his blue eyes dull and heavy. He looked to be in his early 20s, but his face was strained in silent agony, creating wrinkles around his mouth that made him look older. With his bout of panic easing, James broke through the tree line with his horse trailing behind him. James blindly held out the reins to his sister, his hands visibly shaking. She gladly accepted them as their father clasped his eldest son's shoulder, barely able to keep his bottom lip from trembling. James wrapped his hand around his father's and made a noise in the back of his throat, showing that he was going to be fine. With a haggard sigh, James turned towards Lily and gave her a nod, silently thanking her for not only helping him, but also his family, who huddled around him like terrified puppies that were thrown into a ditch by their owner, forgotten.